Welcome back, Cinephiles. I'm Rod Richards, and today we're going to check out the 1978 film Coming Home, directed by Hal Ashby. Okay, this film is set in 1968 during the peak of the Vietnam War and the peak of the cultural rift and political upheaval that was happening in the United States and around the world. Sally, played by Jane Fonda, is the wife of Bob, played by Bruce Dern, and Bob is a captain in the U.S. Marines who's about to be deployed to Vietnam. Luke, played by Jon Voigt, is a wounded combat veteran who is recuperating in a veterans hospital where Sally's taken on a volunteer job. Okay, I think in general, most people attach too much weight to great acting when they evaluate a film, in the sense that there are many fascinating films out there that feature terrible acting. But in the case of Coming Home, the focus on acting is very much warranted. And the best example of this is the character Sally's on-screen transformation. Sally starts out looking like one of the Nixon daughters, dressing in that conservative sort of 60s way with her hair ironed straight, wearing one of those wide ribbon headband things. So imagine the dutiful wife from a stuffy, politically conservative military family walking into a VA hospital and getting stale urine from a paraplegic veteran splashed all over her. Well, that's where Sally's transformation begins. Jane Fonda is really very good here, and it's interesting to see her play this kind of role. I mean, yeah, we know that she was a very vocal anti-war activist, so that part isn't so surprising. But I get the impression that Jane Fonda really is a thoughtful and intelligent person, and maybe even the kind of person who is capable of introspection and growth. And I think that would be difficult to play convincingly by somebody who didn't possess those qualities in real life. Now, pay particular attention to the two sex scenes in this film. Both of these scenes are pretty short, but they're both powerful in different ways, and they serve to punctuate the change that's happening in her. In the first one, Sally is having sex with her husband, Bob, and this scene is only a few seconds long, but I don't think I've ever seen a plainer depiction of sex as a transactional marital chore in my life. And in this example, her engagement is so low that she certainly doesn't fake an orgasm. She doesn't even feel duty-bound to fake interest. In the other sex scene, later in the film with Luke, well, let's just say it's a very different story indeed. Moving on to the political message of the film, Coming Home definitely is a piece of propaganda. It's a piece of political propaganda, and this is very clear as the director Hal Ashby and both Jane Fonda and Jon Voigt were known to be critics of the war in Vietnam. And the film was made just 5 years after the Vietnam War ended, when this issue was still very much an open wound in the American psyche. And though we've had a number of other military conflicts since then, none of them so far has been as unpopular and divisive as the Vietnam War. Though I agree with the anti-war stance of this film, I think Coming Home is a little uncharitable to those Americans on the other side of this issue, as the film implies that anyone who supported the war was uninformed, misguided, or even delusional. Most of us tend to believe this about people who disagree with us about politics, and sometimes it's objectively true. But it's really important to make a good faith attempt to understand why people who disagree with us think the way they do. And this film makes no real attempt to do that, though that's probably to be expected in a movie like this. And in fact, that is what makes it propaganda. My own father was a Vietnam combat veteran, and I remember that when I asked him decades ago what he thought about this movie, he told me that he didn't like anybody presuming to speak for all Vietnam veterans as if they all had the same experience, because they didn't. Leaving aside the political message, perhaps the best way to watch Coming Home is as a love story. And to me, this is where it really shines. This film portrays adult relationships in a way that is extremely compelling due to the emotional maturity of its main characters. These characters clearly possess very human flaws, but they all seem to be able to communicate well and honestly for the most part. They have accurate and useful insight into their own behavior, and they use that insight to override their egos when necessary, at least some of the time. In my observation of real life, very few people actually possess these qualities in any abundance. I'd say the ones who do are probably in the top 5% of humanity. What do you think? Okay, a bit about the director before wrapping up. Hal Ashby, like Bob Rafelson, whom we mentioned in the last episode, was associated with the so-called New Hollywood movement. Now, the New Hollywood movement was roughly 1967 to 1980, and this corresponds to the peak of Hal Ashby's career. His best-known films are probably Harold and Maude from 1971 and Being There from 1979. Hal Ashby was a little different from your typical ego-driven New Hollywood director. He was a hippie-ish guy, and he had that leftist instinct for collaboration. Hal Ashby was known for not giving his actors a lot of specific direction. And as a result of this, Ashby's films tend to lack an easily identifiable style. And as a result, the actors tended to get more credit for the successes of his films than he did. Okay, that's it for Coming Home. Check this film out. Let me know what you think in the comments. Thank you for watching. See you next time.